The first is that, our shame starts often in those early relationships. And we think, especially when they're toxic relationships, that when we leave the relationships, that we've left the shame. But what we actually do is we pack up those toxic messages and we carry them. We put them in our mind, we carry them with us, and then we begin to say them to ourselves in our own voice, such that we can sometimes lose where the voice even came from, right? But then what we also do is we find relationships that co-sign with our shame. And so we get into a place where we've got our toxic messages we brought with us, and then we connect with people who confirm those toxic messages. And so we think we are in this, echo chamber, which we think is real life, because this must be how everybody thinks of me sees the world. And it's not, but we've just created that because of number one, familiarity and comfort. And sometimes
Leo season's here, and if you've been craving the courage to show up and be truly seen, I made something for you. Safe to Be Seen is my new seasonal workbook filled with soul-centered prompts, mirror work, and grounding rituals to help you embody your light without fear. This isn't about performance, it's about presence, and you're ready. Download it now at my website, empoweredwithmelisahepner.org, or you can go to my link tree on my Instagram, and there is a link directly there. Welcome to Emotionally Unavailable, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of emotional availability and intimacy. I'm your host, Malisa Hepner, and I can't tell you how excited I am to have you join me on this journey of self-discovery and connection. Whether you're navigating the complexities of relationships or exploring your own emotional landscape, this podcast is here to inspire, empower, and entertain. So get cozy and let's explore the depths of human emotions together. Hey everybody, happy Wednesday. Hope you're doing well. I'm doing well. Today's guest is Dr. Zoe Shaw. She is a licensed psychotherapist, author, speaker, podcast host, relationship coach, and coach. Good Lord, y'all. I'm sorry, my brain is not good today. I had wild dreams all night long, so... relationship coach and fitness fanatic. She is a mom to 5 and a wife. She's passionate about helping women who struggle in difficult relationships, especially that sometimes difficult relationship with themselves, overcome shame and codependency. After 15 years in traditional psychotherapy practice, Dr. Zoe jumped off the couch and now helps women using a different modality, a mix of virtual therapy, coaching services, and programs delivered through a lens of psychology, faith, and a dash of feminism. Dr. Zoe is the author of the Ask Dr. Zoe column in the Grit and Grace Project Women's Magazine, A Year of Self-Care, and her upcoming book, Stronger in the Difficult Places, Heal Your Relationship with Yourself by Untangling Complex Shame. She has been published in oprahmag.com, Recovery Today magazine, Forbes, and is a frequent contributor to Your Tango. She writes about helping women overcome shame and codependency. You can find her in the media on Instagram at Dr. Zoe Shaw and in most social spaces at the handle at Dr. Zoe Shaw. I will make sure to include links to her website and her Insta, as well as her podcast. I'm going to try to find a pre-order link for her book. First of all, I try to not make compliments about people based off their physical appearance, but there's something very magnetic about her. She's gorgeous, and I feel guilty saying that because I don't know. I don't like to make those types of compliments because there's so much more to people than the way they look. But I was like, are you a freaking Aquarius rising? Because you have very magnetic eyes. Anyway, you know that my heart sings when I hear women talking about shame work, and she is doing really important work in this world. So I feel very honored and privileged to have had her on my show, and it was just a really, really, really great conversation. So like I said, I will include her links in the show notes. Please check them out. definitely impactful. And I know that you're going to love this conversation. So without further ado, here is me and Dr. Zoe Shaw. Emotionally unavailable. Okay, so sorry again about all the Google confusion. I'm gonna
No,
have
it's
to do
fine.
better
That
about
works.
that. Okay, so I was re-looking at your profile this morning, and why I'm so excited about talking to you is because in my personal life, it I found it was shame that was the center of everything for me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe I'll even be gracious enough to say, like, maybe it was just the final piece of what I had to understand, because my first intro to understanding my CPTSD was in around 2016. I don't know if you're familiar with the holistic psychologist, but she started posting all this stuff
Mm-hmm.
about nervous system regulation. News to me, what? And it was new information. And she was talking so much about trauma, and all I had information about up to that point was trauma related to PTSD and veterans
Mm-hmm.
in
Right.
my entire generation. Let me just be clear about that. We didn't have shit for education around this. I mean, it wasn't available, I don't think. But
Mm-hmm.
so I why it helped is because it lessened just a little the shame I had felt about how reactive I was my whole life. Very reactive, would have been
Mm-hmm.
labeled angry, super normal responses for somebody with my level of trauma in my history, right?
Right.
But but
Right.
that's not the messaging I was receiving my whole life. I'm being told I'm a bitch and that I'm just mean, and I felt mean at my core. I thought I
Mm-hmm.
was a person. And so like people would say nice things about me and I'd be like, if you really knew me, you wouldn't say that. You know, like I
Oh
couldn't
my goodness.
receive at
Yes.
all. You know
Yes.
what I'm talking about, right? So
I do.
uh I went on the journey, and it was a long journey, and it was enough to get me through to a certain point, and then I reached burnout. I was stuck in every area of my life, and I didn't know what to do, and I had all of this very, very loud noise in my head just telling me what a piece of shit I was in all these different ways. So I came to shame work through a podcast guest who told me about a book, and this book broke shame down into different archetypes, and it just made sense to me, and I was able to unravel from there, and then I could get the noise to quiet, because
Mm-hmm.
I was in a very like suicidal place and made a plan every because I was my narrative was like, okay, it's reached the point where your kids are better off without you, because I'm yelling all the time. Now I can look back
Mm-hmm.
and go, you hated yourself because you weren't perfect, and that's really sad. But at the time, it felt very real. So shame work is
Right.
so important. And so I'm really excited to hear about your approach to dismantling shame. So anyway, that's how we're going to intro into that. However you want to pick up from there.
Well, I love everything that you said and what you just described. That feeling of, but you don't know, is really the main identifier for what I call complex shame.
Mhm.
So there's simple shame. And with simple shame, it's kind of the Brene Brown type of shame where you talk about it, you become vulnerable, you receive external compassion, and the shame goes away, right? But for somebody with complex shame, when they receive external compassion, their response is, but you don't know. If only you knew how terrible I really was, you wouldn't be saying those things. And so we cannot accept that compassion or validation. And so instead our shame just goes deeper. And there's another way that complex shame is developed, and that's also when our shame is gaslit. So when we do become vulnerable and someone looks at us and tells us, oh, that's not really how it was, or you're overreacting, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Also, why people in marginalized communities tend to have a higher rate of complex shame. And so, what we have to understand is that for some people, being vulnerable and receiving that compassion doesn't work. And so, we've got to do some other things with our shame. And we can talk about, the different types of things that we can do. But what we also have to understand when it comes to shame is that the purpose of shame, why shame was created, is to distance ourselves in all of our relationships. And I was just doing an interview before this one, and he was talking about getting to healthy shame. And my response was, there is no healthy
There
shame.
is no healthy shame.
There is no healthy shame. And I think that even in the psychological community, there's an understanding that there's healthy shame, which they call adaptive shame. And what they say is that adaptive shame helps us to conform in society. But what we have found is that when we shame people, it looks like they're conforming. But what we actually do with shame is we hide. And so what looks like someone conforming is actually them just hiding their behavior or their thoughts, which
Mm,
makes it more unhealthy. And so I want to move away from this idea that that healthy shame exists. And instead, I want to look at guilt, because guilt can be healthy and adaptive. Now, sometimes guilt's not valid, like mom guilt, right?
sure, sure.
But guilt is an emotion or a brain state that tells us I've broken my moral code. Something that I believe is wrong, I've done that thing. And so I'm going to feel this certain thing about it. But with guilt, we can make a choice to change a behavior. We can make a choice to go back and repair. It's about behavior and our idea about the behavior. The thing about shame is shame becomes about our identity. It's not
Yeah.
I've done something wrong, it's I am wrong. And when we are wrong, there's nothing we can do about that except for hide.
Right.
Then we just want
And
to
you're so
hide who we
powerless.
are.
Yes.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so we want to move away from shame. We want to allow ourselves to feel guilt when necessary, because guilt is a excellent behavior modifier, right? And an inciter to change. But shame is not.
Yeah, and guilt should be, in my opinion, and I'm developing this thought as I say it, so I may not get this right, but if I'm looking at guilt, it really kind of should be pretty quick. It's like a,
Mhm.
ooh, that hit me in the place where I know like that didn't feel good, so I'm going to course
Right.
correct, and I'm probably not going to do that again. Like yelling, I do it less and less and
Yes.
less because
Yes.
I don't like the way it feels, and I'm after an energy. So like
Mm-hmm.
to me, it's because there are times when a raised voice is valid, like at your dog and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But then even with my dog, sometimes it's like, oh, when I see my son do it, I don't like it, and I'm like, he didn't understand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's just this quick little way of like, but I think it's quick for me and people who have done the work on shame because it's like, oh, I did something. I don't want to do that again. Moving on. I'm not attaching a narrative to it. So I'm not going into
Mm-hmm.
shame because there's no morality assigned, there's no emotion assigned. It's just I don't like that. I shouldn't have done that.
Right.
Or I'm going to try
Yeah.
something different next time. But I have a question. Okay, so back to what you said about by the way, the somebody saying healthy shame kind of triggered me. But the uh when you said like marginalized communities especially about gaslighting, I wanted to ask a
Yes.
clarifying question about that. Were you saying that it creates more shame, compounds it, whatever, because um somebody's denying your experience and so then you feel shame for having the feelings or let me give you an example. I used to have a friend that I still have a friend, but she doesn't do this. But she would say like you're too sensitive and then I would internalize that and be like, yeah, I probably was making way too big of a deal about that because that's what I grew up with. So, like, just
Right.
constant minimalizing and trivializing my experiences. So, when a friend, someone I've chosen to be in community with, would
Mm-hmm.
say something like that, I mean, I was just covered in the emotion of like, man, I'm never going to be good enough for friendships. I am never going to
Mm,
understand how to just like communicate with people. Whatever the narratives were around it. Is that what you meant by that? I just
mm-hmm.
wanted to clarify because I wasn't sure if you were saying gaslighting the shame itself or gaslighting creates another level of shame.
Right. So it's both. So there's a shame that happens. And then you talk to somebody about that shame. You become vulnerable. And then what happens is they tell you that either one, like you're too sensitive, which is completely just dismissing your experience,
Mhm.
or they tell you that didn't happen. Right? That didn't happen, or that's not a big deal, or something that completely gaslights your entire experience. It tells you that what you felt, experienced, saw was not real. And so then two things happen with you. One is you may co-sign with that idea. I
Mhm.
am. And whenever we say I am and attach it to something negative, that's shame, right? I am too sensitive. I can't see the world from a real lens. My lens is distorted. Something's wrong with me. And then also there's this distancing that happens that's, well, I must just be broken. I must be not good enough. I must be broken because the external world is telling me that my experience is not real, right? And if this is my experience, then there must be something really wrong with me. And so all of those things happen. And so our shame just dives deeper.
Yeah. And looking back at mine, my God, like it was no wonder because I mean, I was raised by a narcissist on top of all of the, addiction that was in my family and just the nonstop trauma.
Mm-hmm.
But like, it wasn't my parents and their addiction that had the most significant impact on me. It was my grandma,
Mm-hmm.
the person I spent all of
Mm-hmm.
this time with, making me believe I owed her an eternal debt of gratitude for raising me. And, all the narcissist tricks and the things they do, dividing me and my siblings, using me as a therapist at like 10, like all of the things.
Yeah.
And I just could not ever measure up to her standards. That was the first thing that I ever felt about who I was as a human was I'm not enough. And I
Mm-hmm.
just think that all of the dismissing, all of the minimalizing and trivializing, it just added up all the years because I started to believe in even the times when I would have a little more confidence in what I was feeling, like particularly after learning from the holistic psychologist, because I consumed anything she put out for years. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Even during that part, because I didn't understand emotions still or how emotionally
Mm-hmm.
unavailable I was, that I was so afraid of being vulnerable because I was so good at trauma dumping
Yes.
or just
Yeah.
making a stand-up comedy act out of my trauma, either or. Um, I thought
Mm-hmm.
that was vulnerability. So after all of that, I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I don't know how to like differentiate between what's real and what's not anymore." So I would try to use that confidence of like, well, she said right here, like that is. And so I'd be like, no, you are da da da. But there, it was always there
Mm-hmm.
because I now know too, I chose the exact wrong people at all times to share my shit with because that was a way I got to confirm my bias too, was that I'll choose
Right.
the worst possible person to try to be vulnerable with so that when they give me exactly what I knew they would, it can confirm to me that I have nobody to talk to, that I am on the periphery of my relationships, that nobody loves me, all of the things. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, I'm saying that in hindsight and, from an expanded consciousness, but man, I was driving myself insane and hurting my own feelings like 24/7, just living in my brain, telling myself, it wasn't going to get better because I couldn't get better. I understood that this was related to the trauma, but I thought I just can't flip the switch back or something. I really felt so out
Mm-hmm.
of control.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that we do with our shame. The first is that, our shame starts often in those early relationships. And we think, especially when they're toxic relationships, that when we leave the relationships, that we've left the shame. But what we
Mhm.
actually do is we pack up those toxic messages and we carry them. We put them in our mind, we carry them with us, and then we begin to say them to ourselves in our own voice, such that we can sometimes lose where the voice even came from. Right. But then what we also do is we find relationships that co sign with our shame. And so we
Mm,
get into a place where we've got our toxic messages we brought with us, and then we connect with people who confirm those toxic messages. And so we think we are in this, echo chamber, which we think
mhm,
is real life, because this must be how everybody thinks of me, sees the world. And it's not, but we've just created that because of number one, familiarity and comfort. And
mhm.
sometimes we are not even aware of our own shame and how deep it runs. We're just thinking maybe, oh, we are just, empathic, or we're just, I mean, essentially we're codependent, right? But we're just caring about the
Uh-huh.
other person. And I just want to keep this relationship. And he really loves
I'm
me. He
too
doesn't mean it. All of
nice.
those things.
Mhm.
Yes, I'm too nice. But really what it is that you're drowning in shame.
Yeah, I love what you said about it sounding like your voice, because that was where I started. Was,
Mm-hmm.
man, I am saying a bunch of really mean stuff to myself, but what was happening was a lot of conflicting arguments. Like,
Right.
at first telling myself, like, man, what a piece of shit you are for doing that, and then, but you wouldn't have done it if they hadn't done this, and then another, back and forth
Mm-hmm.
with them, and then
Mm-hmm.
another voice. And I was like, no, I'm actually crazy now, because I have schizophrenia in my family. So I was like, no, that's the what this is. And it wasn't until
Mm-hmm.
I started unraveling each part of that, of the person who's telling me what a piece of shit I am, the person who's telling me that I wouldn't have been doing that if they hadn't done this, the person who gives me permission to behave badly, all of the things. Once I learned to externalize any of that, then I could understand. It started to become so clear, because
Right.
that wasn't me. I didn't develop these narratives for no reason. Like, they happened,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they were
Yes.
coping. They were straight up somebody else's voice. They were all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I it's I get frustrated because I can't always get people to understand. I mean, I can with my clients, because I have them, we're talking week after week. But, like, if I were to try to talk to my 22-year-old son, and he's like, I don't have shame. You're right, honey, you don't. But yes, he does. But I like how you said, if you're saying something beginning with the words I am, and it's negative, we can look at shame. And that's such a
Right.
beautiful example of it, because we do have to have some qualifiers so that people can see, like, oh, okay, why was I thinking that? Or whatever
Mm-hmm.
exploration you want to take, so that you can understand and experience the fact that you have subconscious shame.
Right. The other blinking red light that people can see is anywhere in your life that you are hiding, that's where shame exists. So if
Mm.
there's any place that you feel like, I don't want them to know, I need to hide, I can't let them see, that is where your shame exists.
Oh, that's a good one. Because we do that a lot more than we recognize.
Mm-hmm.
And you made me think of
Mm-hmm.
this whenever you were talking about the last interview, is that people really do believe that shame is a good motivator for change. I remember I vape. I used to be a hardcore smoker, like 3 packs a day. Like, I don't vape because it's cool, and I didn't just, like, pick it up out of nowhere. I transitioned to it. One day I'll quit that too, but, like, the amount of shame people have tried to put on me for that, and I literally don't give a shit about it. Like, I vape during these things. Like, if I want to, I pick it up. I just am me now, because I spent a
Mm-hmm.
lot of time hiding, 44 years to be exact. So I don't do
Mm-hmm.
that anymore. But people believe that if they say things like that to me, that's a good motivator for me to quit. I remember
Mm.
a time it would have just made me hide. I would have probably just avoided them in general, because, like,
That's
I didn't
hiding.
not
Mm-hmm.
do it, but I
Yes.
wasn't gonna do it in front of someone who's gonna say something to me. Or even, like, my grandma was the worst about body stuff, because she was 98 pounds soaking wet my entire life. Like, she was just one of those people. And it would be like, you sure you need that cookie? But then, like, if I was on a
Mm.
diet, she would be like, why can't you have a cookie? Like, one cookie's not gonna hurt you. It was the most
Wow. It
bizarre
was
thing. Yeah,
sabotaging.
it was the most
Yes.
bizarre thing.
Yeah.
But I was constantly hiding what I was eating around her, whether it was healthy
Mm-hmm.
or not healthy foods, whatever it was. I would not want to eat around her because she like always had something to say about it. Always, always.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I can think of hundreds of examples like that where I've hidden things because I couldn't handle the feeling of somebody saying something like that to me, and I wasn't like confident enough to be like, the fuck, but I would just hide. So
Mm-hmm.
you're right. Like I was just compounding my shame every time I hid too, because I believed it was necessary to hide it instead of just being like, stand up for yourself or stay away from them, like whatever the case may be.
Right. Exactly. And we do feel that it's necessary to hide. And here's the thing. The things we need to do in childhood to survive are not the same things that we need to continue to do in adulthood to thrive.
Mm.
And a lot of people mistake that because if it worked then, it kept me alive, it kept me, the people I needed to take care of me, then it must continue to work. And the reality is those defense mechanisms have an expiration date. And we need to look at those things in our lives that we did when we were young because maybe we weren't in the healthiest situations. And we need to honor them because it's good that you created, that hiding practice. It's good that you did those things because it allowed you to be taken care of and loved and accepted. But
Mhm.
it's not working for you now because the hiding distances you from healthy love. And if what you want is to be able to be free in the world and to be yourself. And if you want, what you want is to experience healthy love, then we've got to let go of some of those defense mechanisms that worked very well in childhood.
Yeah. What do you say to people who don't quite understand the fact that they are doing so much to keep a lot of separation between them and everyone around
Mhm.
them? The parts of that I understand are so intimate, but I'm not always great at being able to really clarify it. So how could you explain that?
I think the first thing is, like I said already, if you notice that you need to hide, that you want to hide, that's a place where you need to do work. That's where shame is. And then if you notice that when you're interacting with other people, that you feel uncomfortable because your distancing response happens after you feel uncomfortable, and it may be with emotional intimacy if someone's trying to go deeper with you and it makes you feel scared, right? And so then your response is to distance in some way. It's often not uh it's not apparent. It's like a subtle distance, which is what
Mhm.
creates that kind of crazy making for people in relationships when they're interacting with someone who's emotionally unavailable or distant or
Could be
avoidant.
like the ick even, yeah?
Yes, it can feel like the ick. And so, but as if you're a person that tends to be emotionally avoidant or distant, what you have to recognize is when you start to feel uncomfortable. And when you start to feel uncomfortable, you want to ask yourself, what's scary for me right now? What am I feeling? Am I worried of exposure? Am I scared that, if I do go deeper in this relationship that they will reject me? Am I fearful of rejection? What is going on for me right now that's making me want to go, oh, hold on, I gotta put up the wall, I gotta distance, I gotta, keep myself safe, right? And
Right.
then a question I like people to ask is, if I weren't scared, what would I do? Because often we feel like we have to not be scared first in order
Right.
to do the thing, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't work that way. I want to challenge you, and you can ask yourself a couple of questions. Is this person really unsafe? Or is this about my past? Right? And if the person is safe, then the question you want to ask yourself is, if I weren't scared, what would I do? And now I already know people are going to be like, well, how do I know he's safe? He or she might not be safe. I can't determine if that person is safe or not, right? And so then the next thing that I want you to pay attention to is, we create the story for ourselves that unless we know 100% that someone is safe, we cannot be emotionally available.
Mhm.
And so we continue in this way in relationship with distance, convincing ourselves that at some point if we know for sure that person is safe, we are going to be emotionally available. That point never comes because when you're distancing yourself from somebody, then they are not going to move towards you in that way. Right. And
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
yes. And so what we have to do is we have to trust ourselves. We don't have to trust other people as much in adulthood as we needed to in childhood. Right?
Right.
Because we can take care of ourselves. And so what we trust is that if I am vulnerable with this person and they do not respond in a healthy way, I can trust myself that I can take care of myself, that I will
Mm-hmm.
know what to do, that I will know not to do that again. Right? That I will learn from that experience. It's not that we shouldn't be emotionally available. We just have to trust that we can take care of ourselves if it doesn't turn out how we hoped.
Oh, I love the way you put that. That's so true. Because I remember talking to somebody here on on the early days of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're still begging people to come on your show. Um, and she's a friend of mine, and I remember saying like, okay, so do you have people that you're emotionally available with? And she was like, well, my therapist, I mean, I will if they feel safe. And I'm like, oh, okay, so you've determined that nobody else in your life is safe enough to talk to
Exactly.
you? That's a you problem, babe. And it just made me giggle because I
Yes.
can relate to that. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, one of the ways that I push people away or what feels unsafe to me is expectations. When I start to
Mm-hmm.
feel like they need me a little too much, I will cut you off. Like that is a pattern I have had my entire life. That's not the narrative that was present at the time. Like on a conscious
Right.
level, I believed they were toxic or they whatever I made up about them to believe that they were
Needy or
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And
Right.
ew,
Mm-hmm.
even though like I loved needy people because it gave me a project. So like but
Mm-hmm.
once it crossed over to where I the fear was I wouldn't be able to meet the expectations. Then
Exactly.
it felt like
Exactly.
the ick for me. Like, ooh, cannot even with you. Like, you're gonna have to go because,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I found myself repeating that pattern even like 9 months ago, in a
Mm-hmm.
friendship. It's like, okay, I don't understand why this is happening quite yet, but I'm gonna like unravel stuff because I know that what my conscious is telling me is a lie. I just know that. So I'm gonna try to figure
Right.
out, and it wasn't, and it, I had to be so intentional to uncover the fact that what I was actually afraid of was their expectations of me. But
That's
inside,
beautiful.
the feeling just made me want to cut them off and never talk to them again, like I had
Mm-hmm.
done so many times before. And gee, I wonder why I felt like I loved everybody else more than they loved me. Because these are
Mm-hmm.
all the things
Mm-hmm.
I did to hide and protect myself and just confirm that like this is the key to safety is to never tell people the truth and not have them need you too much, just enough but not too much. It was a never-ending cycle. Like to the point where I have so much remorse over it, like not like all the time, but when I have conversations like this, I'm always like, I'd really like to apologize to a few people, but I also don't want to like open up new wounds in their life, But I'm like, God, there were so many. There were
Mm-hmm.
so many that I pushed away.
Yeah. And so what you have, it's wonderful that you got to that point of recognizing I'm afraid of not being able to meet their expectations, of not being good enough. And that draws a straight line back to your childhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what we have to do with that is when you recognize the thing that you're afraid of, then you've got to have a conversation about what if that happens? Because when we don't answer that question for our brain, we just create a sense of anxiety that pushes away because we're like, what if I can't meet their expectations? And then we don't answer the question. We leave our brain
Right.
hanging and all we feel is anxiety. And so we've got to answer those questions. What if I don't meet their expectations? Well, if I don't meet their expectations, I know I'm still worthy. I know I'm still whole. I know I'm still good enough. And I know that because I know that, I can come to them and have a conversation with them about their needs, about the expectations that weren't met. And we
Mhm.
can, in relationship, there's space for that. I can give myself space, and I will give my, person, friend, whatever, the person I'm in relationship with, space to have a conversation about unmet expectations. And then I can figure out, is it me? Is it them? What's going on? But I don't have to end the
Right.
relationship if I can't or don't meet somebody else's expectations.
Well, and it makes sense to me that myself and anybody else struggling with this would feel like ending the relationship is the best thing to do if you don't know what the next step would be. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm still learning how to allow in conversation because I've hidden my whole life. I have only even just begun in the last since I started the show to feel so comfortable using my voice instead of writing because I could craft a perfect sentence. And now I'm, as I get more and more comfortable with being messy, I'm really
Mm-hmm.
comfortable with having those conversations. Well, that's a lie. I'm not really comfortable, but I
You're
will just
learning to be
I will do it,
comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, I will do it, and, the next step was not cutting people off when they say things that upset me, like, that I was still holding both of us to this standard of perfection where I'm gonna say that like we're role playing therapy. I'm gonna say, "This is what's
Yeah.
going on with me," and then you're gonna respond perfectly, and then that's gonna be that. Where there's gonna be a resolution, well, that's
Mm.
not true. And so like now I'm the next step for me was learning you're the one responsible for creating the safety within you. And so no matter what somebody's doing in response to how I expressed myself, it's my job to be the container. And so I have to like breathe through their response because the truth is
Mm-hmm.
I'm not good at receiving anything outside of what my brain really wanted, but I'm learning to just be like, okay, and reset because I'm going to do this too. I'm still going to be triggered and just say some shitty stuff. I'm going to do that. I'm also not always going to be perfect when someone's telling me I've hurt them. Especially my kids, I'm not going to handle that perfectly every time. They have full license to do
Right.
that. They know that. They're allowed to tell me anything I've ever done to hurt them. But, you catch me on a bad day and I'm going to respond with less compassion than I am like, well, especially because I've kind of for a while the rule was like you're allowed to say anything you want, but I'm not your punching bag. So you can't just like be triggered about something and then start talking shit to me about like what I did to you in childhood. Like that
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do that. And now I don't necessarily have that rule, but like you catch me during PMS, I'm probably not going to respond very lovingly. Like, "Oh, okay, good. Another way that,
Mm-hmm.
well for that's what happens when we're humans. I have emotions. I'm not always going to be really good at receiving, just like the people I am giving my shit to don't always receive well. But that's okay. Like I'm getting really good at being like, okay, and then when we paused, we both came back
Mm-hmm.
together. We were able to have a different level of conversation. But used to, that would have been it. I would have hung up the phone and then that would
Mm-hmm.
have been it forever. For the rest of our lives, I would have never spoken to them again. I was so good at that.
Yeah. Yeah. What people often think is that when they cut someone off in relationship, that they've set a really great firm boundary. And the reality is that cutting people off eliminates your need to have boundaries.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
you're not practicing boundaries in relationship when you just cut people off. The harder thing is to actually create healthy boundaries in relationships instead of cutting people off.
Yes, because I was that person with my limited understanding of boundaries. Like, there's that
Mhm.
conceptual part where you're like, oh, okay, if I want this result, I have to say this, I'm the one responsible, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't really understand it. So what I constantly found myself in was, well, even placing boundaries around like how you could or couldn't respond to me or what you could or couldn't even talk about in my general field, which I will be honest, there are still some like politics, like if you're on the opposite side of how I feel about it, a lot of times I already know we're not going to have a productive conversation, and it's not going to end well. So unless you're like someone in my family, we just don't go there because my family, we can cuss each other out and we're going to get over it, but I just don't even want to do that with people. It's a waste of energy for me. So that's a boundary. I just don't go there with people. Now, I'll talk about humanity all day, and I'll talk about what I think is going wrong with humans all day, but like talking about fucking politicians, they all suck. Like, why would I do that? So I don't do that a lot. And like, I have people in my life that are really disrespectful about some things, so I don't go around them because there's just certain topics that are just really hot for me, and I'm not there yet. So I
Hmm.
could still be in the wrong, but I'm not there, and they're disrespectful as fuck is how I view them. So I just don't. But where I was doing this in my life a lot was I would get so mad, like somebody would ask me for a favor, and I'd be so mad that they asked because now I'm gonna, like, I either have to say no, which I don't want to do. I never wanted to say no to anyone, or
Hmm.
I'm gonna have to do it resentful.
Mm.
I really believed it was their fault for
Right.
asking in the first place. I really did believe that. It was their fault.
Mm.
Mhm, mhm.
You know, one of my definitions of boundaries is that boundaries are rules for ourselves. They're not rules for other people. And if you're trying to put rules for other people in your life, then you're not against setting healthy boundaries. And so it's never really about what other people do. It's about how you choose to respond to what other
Mhm.
people do. And so, yes, you were mad at them because they were creating a necessity for you to put in a boundary and you didn't want to put in a boundary. And so
Right.
you wanted to blame them. And there's nothing wrong with their asking. You
Right.
just have to create the healthy boundary. And that's hard. It's hard.
I believed there was some, oh my God, I could name so many examples of people asking me for things I didn't want to do. And then I'd be like, because I was like every other unhealed person where all we do is talk shit and complain. So I'd be calling a friend about another friend, like, can you believe she asked that? And sometimes they'd be like, I mean, I don't, yeah, I'd ask that. And I'd be like, "Ugh, now I'm mad at you too." It was just a cycle repeating all day, every day in my life.
Yeah.
Man. Well, what do you say to people who like what is a first kind of step into this work that you're doing?
Yeah. So I've written a book called Stronger in the Difficult Places, and the subtitle is Heal Your Relationship with Yourself by Untangling Complex Shame. And in the book, I delineate 8 steps to overcoming complex shame. And it starts with understanding your initial shame story. It starts with understanding those toxic messages that I talked about and understanding your own phantom critic, those words that you say to yourself. And then what we have to do is we have to deconstruct blame. And deconstructing blame, I think, is the hardest part, especially when we've had our own trauma. And the
Yeah.
reason why deconstructing blame is so important is because the traditional way of looking at being a victim or looking at shame is for an outside person to help you to get to understand how it wasn't your fault and how you should remove the blame, right? Whether that's a therapist doing that for you. And it's a really honorable thing to do to try to help somebody understand why that's not your fault, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work because that's not how our brain works. And
Mm,
so what happens is when someone tries to alleviate your shame, your response is, oh, but you don't know. Just like you said, you
mhm.
don't understand. And so what we have to do then is we have to actually look at the things that we did, even in our own victimization. And this is not about blaming the victim. It's about understanding that in every single action that comes towards us, we in microseconds have reactions, right? And then however we react, we then can have regret about that. We could have shame about that. And then we blame ourselves and that shame continues. And so what I invite people to do is begin to look at the things that you blame yourself for and then work towards a place of forgiving yourself. So forgiving yourself that you didn't speak up, forgiving yourself that you walked into that room, forgiving yourself that you didn't fight, forgiving yourself that you did fight, whatever it is, forgiving yourself for the ways that you hurt yourself and sabotage yourself. When we can get to that place of owning those experiences and forgiving ourselves for whatever choices we made in the moment, then we can open up a door that allows shame to begin to fall apart. And when we forgive ourselves, I like to think of this definition of forgiveness. It's by Japolinsky. And the definition is forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better past. I absolutely love that definition because it's not attached to anybody.
Yeah.
It's just, can you have the courage to forget, to give up all hope that your past could have been different, that your choices
Yeah.
could have been different, that their choices could have been different. And when we can get to that place of giving up all hope of a better past, now we've opened ourselves to let go of shame. And now we can become vulnerable and we can receive somebody's external compassion because we've given it to ourselves,
Yep.
but also because we have taken ownership and we are okay in our self. If someone else does not give us that compassion, we are still valid and worthy and okay, and we can know that. If someone else even tries to gaslight us about our experience, because we have untangled it all and looked at it, we already know we're okay. And so
Mm-hmm.
those are kind of some of the steps. And then there's a lot of maintenance that has to happen because shame
Sure.
is not something that ever goes away. We can heal ourselves of it. We can untangle it from our lives, but the world will continue to put it on us. And so
Yeah.
when shame shows up, we've got to have a maintenance program that understands that and quickly kind of defers or pushes it away from our identity. And just, I like to think of it as just, I'm going to let that roll down the river in my brain. I see the shame. I feel that shame for a second. I recognize what it is. I know that that is not about me and my identity. And so I'm going to let that pass through.
Oh, I love that. Oh, man, what a beautiful conversation. Say the name of your book again and then tell us where we can pre-order that.
Yeah, so the name of my book is Stronger in the Difficult Places, and I will give your audience the first chapter for free. So I can give
Oh,
you the link where
yay.
they can get the first chapter and they can read it and decide if it's for them or not.
Okay, great. And is it okay if I put that link in the show notes or no?
Please, that's how they
Okay,
get it.
yay.
Yes.
Okay, yay. And
Yes.
then where can people find you? You have a podcast, right?
I do. I have a podcast by the same name. It's called Stronger in the Difficult Places, and it's specifically, it's mostly for women, although I have a lot of men that listen too. But my goal with the podcast is to help women overcome complex shame and codependency and difficult relationships, so that they can experience healthy love and freedom. And then you can find me anywhere. My website is Dr. Zoe Shaw. My handle on IG, social media is Dr. Zoe Shaw.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm going to follow you on Instagram for sure. And if it's okay, I'll make you collaborator on posts and stuff. And
Absolutely.
I received the, all of your stuff. So yeah, I'm excited about this. I love what you're doing. I feel like more people need to be focusing on this particular aspect of healing and growing and evolving as a human. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm so honored to have met you today and spent time with you. And I'm serious. I just love the work you're doing. And I will make sure to include all of your stuff in my show notes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Melissa, for all of the work that you're doing as well. Thank you for having me on today.
Absolutely. I hope you have a fabulous Friday.
You too.
Hey, make sure you've given the show a 5-star rating on whatever platform you're listening to if you haven't already. And check out my website, empoweredwithmelisahepner.org, or my link tree on Instagram at melissa.hepner to check out my latest offers or workshops. Emotionally unavailable. All right, that's it from me. So make sure that you check out the show notes for links. And until next time, let's all just keep swimming. Emotionally unavailable.
INDEPE and cut.